Hi, this is Dr. Justin Marcagiani here, and today's talk's on how to heal faster and perform better. We're going to be going over some of the underlying causes, maybe that what are preventing you from healing or actually performing at your optimal potential. So essentially, first things first, we have to talk about the role of force absorption. So we have different postures. For instance, we know if we have a really good straight posture, we're going to resist the force of gravity much better. We're going to feel less stress. What I mean is if we bend over slightly and hunch our back, we're going to see all kinds of different force accumulate in the area of the lower back and the hips and the legs and the knees and so forth. Just like on this diving board over here, this diving board bends up and down and its job is to absorb force, and there's going to be stress in that position. When you have an optimal posture, we're going to see muscles firing properly and we're going to see healthy stress throughout the body. Well, as time goes on, it's easy for injuries to occur. Right, from sitting from a long period of time, car accident, athletic injuries, just stress from our diet and lifestyle, it's easy for muscles to lack facilitation. They become turned off from a neurological standpoint. Not that they aren't working and you're paralyzed, but if we were to test them using a muscle test or applied kinesiology, we would see those muscles aren't absorbing force, maybe compared to a muscle on the other side of the body. And it's pretty obvious when you do a muscle test. And this is important because if these areas aren't absorbing force, it's going to predispose other areas of the body to injury. And you can see force in the ankle as well. Nobel Prize laureate Roger Sperry, he actually found out that 90% of all stimulation and nutrition to the brain is generated by movement of the spine. So essentially, if the spine isn't being supported properly by all the extremities coming outward from it, meaning if those muscles aren't turned on and force absorption is not taking place throughout the body, it's very easy for the spine to become injured. And anytime something becomes injured, what we see is lack of motion. We see fixation. So said another way, our body needs movement. Movement is life. Movement is communication to our body. So it's our job to make sure, it's my job to go in there and make sure everything's moving properly, and also the muscles are talking back and forth to the nervous system, and we know this by basic muscle test. So think of your muscles as shock absorbers, just like the diving board here. They're designed to absorb force. If the muscles are turned on, they're going to absorb force properly, and we're not going to have injury. If the muscles aren't absorbing force, right? Think of driving a car without the shocks. It's a really bumpy ride, and eventually you're going to break your axle and the suspension underneath the car. So just like that, the broken or the bend in the diving board, if our shocks aren't working properly, all of these stressors start becoming active. So our goal is to make sure our shock absorption is working. So again, we talked about communication. 90% of the communication occurs via movement in the spine. So if we're moving, we're going to provide healthy movement to the brain. When we're in pain, what's actually happening is we're providing more pain signal to the brain, or more nociception than movement signal. Just think about it. Last time you're stiff and you're in pain, do you really want to go out and do a lot of things? Move around, go for a hike? Probably not. Usually the more pain you have, the less you want to move. And a lot of times moving through pain, especially if you're not fixing the underlying cause, can actually make the problem worse. So again, our goal is to get the muscles turned back on and make sure the joints are moving properly so we can flip the switch and provide more proprioceptive input or movement input versus pain or nociceptive input. So this is really looking at the body neurologically and looking at how the nervous system activates various muscles and provides support for the joints of the body. And again, it's important we need good stimulation. Good stimulation allows our brain to myelinate and to be healthy, and ideally super smart too, or wicked smart if you will. So how force absorption works. So again, essentially here we have our sodium potassium pump. So we have an influx of sodium and potassium, which allows this potential here to depolarize and get back up to a neutral polarity. It's just the resting charge of the cell tends to be more negative. It gets back to a more positive, to a more neutral, I should say, current that allows a calcium release, and then we have an action potential, and then we actually see a contraction and relaxation of the muscle. So force comes in, that muscle has to elongate to absorb that force. So imagine jumping off a plyometric box. Your muscles have to elongate, your hamstrings and your glute have to elongate to absorb that force. So this charge here becomes more neutral, this sodium potassium pump thing happens, and we absorb force. And that's a healthy contraction. Now if we start having inflammation here, well, one, the inflammation starts to mess around with the polarity and the charge of the muscle, and we start seeing the inability of the muscle to absorb force properly. And this is noted by the lightning bolt here. So our goal is to address, where the inflammation is, address the underlying cause, whether it's using ARP wave or applied kinesiology or chiropractic or soft tissue techniques, to address the underlying cause, to fix that. So essentially, if we ignore force absorption, over time we develop compensation patterns. Well, the easiest thing to think of here is, well, if you hurt your ankle, you may develop a limp over time. That limp is essentially a compensation pattern to shift the weight from one side of the body to the other side of the body. And over time, that compensation pattern can become permanent at some type of, subacute level. May not be noticeable, but over a long period of time, it can be there. So we want to also address the compensation pattern as well. And you're going to see inflammation starts to occur. We have mast cells and lymphocytes and phagocytes and substance P or inflammatory compounds start to develop here over time. So the goal is to go back to figure out what muscles are turned on or turned off to get our natural shock absorbers back on track so our body can absorb force and be healthy and perform well. For any questions, feel free and visit the information just below the video here. There's some links to my websites and other free information that I may have. Thanks a lot. This is Dr. Justin signing off. Have a great day.